Okay, here we go. So I decided to cover all my bases and listed all the questions, each on one slide. So let's talk about unit plans and the lessons I've observed over the years. So, how was their planning reflected as they taught the lesson? This is, of course, referring to the teachers whom I have observed over the years. And, I've observed a lot of different lessons over the years, but one thing that all the good lessons have in common is that they all have a backup plan. Things just do not always go according to the main plan, plan A. And also the good ones seem to flow seamlessly, smoothly, effortlessly. It's only when we debrief, the other teacher and I, do I find out that some things didn't really work and they had to make some changes, and the amazing part is I didn't even realize it sometimes. Sometimes I do realize it. All right, so some of the most effective lessons I've observed include my former head teacher from my school in Shanghai last year, and the lesson of the science head, same school last year. And 1 year when I taught university in China, but I guess that's a different category. I'm not gonna lie, I really think that I found them effective, largely, or at least partly, because they were head teachers. I hope they know what they're doing, which is not always the case, of course, but something in the back of my mind kind of clicked automatically when I entered the classroom to observe, and it told me, this is gonna be a good lesson. Okay, but no, more importantly, what made these lessons effective were how authoritative but not tyrannical the teachers were. Things were going to get done a certain way, and the students knew it, the teachers knew it, and there was room for discussion, but there wasn't so much room that it disrupted the flow of the lesson, that it reduced the amount of content that could be delivered. There was a very high sense of deliberateness as opposed to deliberation that these successful lessons had. Visual aids, kids these days, right? They can't really listen, but they seem to like sparkly, shiny things on the board, moving objects. But there is a point, a saturation point, when you can no longer depend on visual aids. And in these cases, a lot of the teachers, the effective teachers that I've observed, they enacted their own systems, implemented their own physical systems to get these students to be engaged. And one specific example that I can remember is that my former head teacher of English liked to snap her fingers, but not in a sort of rude, calling the waiter kind of way, but sort of like this to catch the students' attention. And that was just so quirky and offbeat enough that the students always realized that she was doing that. Also, talking at an appropriate pace is very important. That's something that I really should work on. I think I still talk too fast in almost every given situation, mostly social, but sometimes educational as well. Speaking of talking, it's important not to talk down to the students. The successful teachers I've observed engaged the students by letting the students know that they had high expectations of them and that these students were capable of learning more than they already knew. It was not going to be boring, but it would be boring if these students chose to make things so. Both. You can't have only one. I mean, of course, contemporary innovative practices suggest quite strongly that most classrooms should be student-centered. or more student-centered than teacher-centered. But you really need both. Sure, you can let students into their own world and launch them, let them embark on their own journey of learning, but there needs to be a bit of lecture involved. And these teachers, I think, combined teacher-centered approaches and student-centered approaches quite well. The students were required to produce things, but the teacher was also required to guide them. Oftentimes it was individual guidance, group by group, but sometimes the teacher just needed to say something to the entire class at the same time, and the students knew they had to listen for the sake of saving time for everybody. Yes and no. The science teacher used a lot of PBL. He was kind of the spearhead of PBL at our school last year. And I think science just really lends itself to PBL in the same way that a lot of English and social studies classes, according to many teachers, really lend themselves to reading standards or language arts standards. In the case of these teachers, the students had projects to complete. They needed to produce things, to make things, but sometimes they were hypothetical and therefore not strictly PBL. At the same time, these students were working together. They had to do some research on their iPads. Last year, every student had an iPad at my school. And that is just something that really puts these projects sort of in the zone of PBL, but not exactly. Well, smartboard, but I chose this leaky faucet to emphasize that technology was used sparingly. You cannot depend on technology all the time. What if the internet stopped working? What if the iPad stopped working? There was always, going back to the first point, a backup. Technology is a supplement. It's salad dressing. It can't be the salad itself. Although I would argue that these days it's certainly becoming more and more the salad. Well, gamification is one of my favorite innovative practices, and I saw a lot of it in the lessons that these teachers delivered, lessons that I observed. Just to make learning a game, one teacher used an app, an online app, a website called Classcraft, and it's basically turning the classroom into a game. It's like Class Dojo, but even more immersive. Think of Warcraft, Starcraft, and now you have Classcraft. The students were making things, presentations, reports, and they were presenting these products to their teachers. That is perhaps the most straightforward way of knowing that students were learning. They were putting their new knowledge to use. Pop quizzes are also good, not letting the students know that they were going to be tested. All right, in addition to pop quizzes, I have found that certain formative assessments are also helpful, and the presentations themselves should be formative assessments, not summative. Summative is just, we really put too much emphasis on summative assessments, and it's, well, I really like the way my hands are moving in and out on this. Anyways, I really have to move on to the final question. My own reflection on unit planning. Well, unit planning is, for it to be effective, it has to be a little more sort of set in stone than lesson plans are. I mean, sure, lesson plans can shift and adjust and adapt all the time, but unit plans, if we're going to meet our goals, we have to be a little stricter with ourselves than with lesson plans. So there has to be a unit goal and different lesson objectives. If necessary, to achieve the goal, we might have to insert a few more lessons and tweak some objectives around. And that, I believe, is a central tenet of successful unit planning. And my time is up according to the timer, the pretty timer that I have down there. So, thanks for watching.